As of the recording of this video, I've spent about 50 hours or so playing Gray Zone Warfare. In my first video, I gave my initial thoughts insofar as to the mechanics, the gameplay, where I thought the game direction was going, and my concerns for the IP. This, of course, was only after about 8 or so hours, but most of that remains the same. I mean, my feelings on it anyway. However, I found that in playing more, I developed a greater appreciation for the direction that the devs have gone in, or seem to be going in, and I find myself rethinking some of the critiques I gave in that video. But at the same time, I find myself more critical of other things I hadn't yet considered until after I had played it a significant number of hours. Also, given some of the comments on my last video, I want to make sure that I say this. I realize this game is in an alpha stage of its life cycle, pre-alpha even. Being mindful of that, my job as part of what I do anyway is to evaluate and give my thoughts on what I think would be most beneficial to a game like this one, while still allowing to pay credence to the ideas and direction that the creators of this game say that they want it to become. These videos, in my opinion, serve as feedback to the development team, along with several notes and other things that I've written to them already, explaining why I think this or that might need a change in order for this game to truly be able to stand on its own in a world full of games that are already very similar to this one. I also want to make mention here that a lot of the critiques that I'm giving in this video and my last one are things that not only other content creators with significant numbers of hours, but also the development team already agree with me on. So first, let's talk about the good. I want to build on the last video that I made and talk about the environment, the details, the things that make this game what I believe to be a good game at its core. Environmentally, this game knocks it right out of the park. Period. End of sentence. The jungle feels absolutely alive. Probably too alive, given the overbearing amount of ambient noise that gets piped into your ears, but I'm confident at some point they'll be able to remedy this. The bugs and the frog sounds get overwhelmingly loud at times. Riding around in a chopper, in a little bird, over the jungle while you're blasting Vietnam-era tunes like trying to reenact Platoon or Full Metal Jacket goes crazy hard. Unfortunately, I can't play much of that because, you know, TOS and copyright and all that stuff. But from a content creation perspective, you cannot go wrong by playing All Along the Watchtower while you fly over some small Laotian village on the way to retake a fort from the insurgents occupying it. It was a total vibe. And for an alpha playtest, the servers, for the most part, were incredibly optimized. This is a 42 square kilometer map with a helicopter delivering you, and at no point did I see enemy combatants, AI opponents, or players suddenly load in as if they materialized out of thin air. They were rendered at the moment in the horizon at the distance, the moment I should have been able to see them, and they stayed that way. And this was done without any type of jitter, there wasn't any lag, there wasn't any like server hiccup, it was just smooth. Enemies at distance didn't even have their positional data compromised to where they'd blink around like at a lesser frame rate than the rest of the world around them, which is something that we would commonly see a lot in other video games of this size, like DayZ or even Tarkov, for instance. And even though there were an abundance of sound bugs and some small memory leaks, all in all, the performance of this game was and is exemplary. Frame generation using DLSS 3 was fantastic. And at almost no point could you tell that DLSS was even on because there were hardly any visual artifacts or tracers or anything like that at all. They existed, but 95+% of the time, it just looked like a normal render. It was smooth. And from a gunplay perspective, the visual recoil of the firearms, the controlling of them, all of that stuff felt pretty good. I don't think they were doing anything revolutionary or metagame changing in any way, but the performance and handling of the guns in the game felt good, it felt familiar. There are some mechanical issues, at least visually, with some of the guns. Pistols, not in a great place. The recoil on pistols did not feel right. It felt alien, foreign, and it needs to be revisited. And visually for the rifles, they're too far away from the camera, as if the person holding it were holding it away from their body trying to fire it. And trying to fight some of the AI and other players, there was an awful lot of occlusion of visuals, given how much outgassing was going on from the front end of the barrel. Now, this could be attributed to certain gun builds. I didn't try to toy around with or play with every single possible gun build. It just seemed like they all generated an awful lot of smoke in front of the reticle, and it was hard to track stuff. Also, the optics in general and their picture-in-picture effect would skew things that you were looking at visually. The L-can, for instance, if you were indoors, would cause this frosted effect on windows, and the red dots would add extra shading to whatever it was that you were looking at, making the image behind them significantly darker. Again, pre-alpha stuff, not really a giant gripe, just saying stuff that existed that I would like to see fixed. In terms of PvP in the game, it did feel rewarding as a fight. Although the time to kill was very short, it reminded me an awful lot of DayZ's PvP, which I don't find to be a bad thing. In fact, after playing this as much as I have lately, it feels as though the game is much closer to that of DayZ than it is to Tarkov, if I'm being honest. Yes, the inventory system is very, very similar to Tarkov, but that's also very similar to other games in this genre. So that is the majority of the really good stuff. And I want to say before I get into this next section that I think the devs are really on the right track here. They're extremely responsive. They obviously have some passion for it. You can tell that right away. And the lead dev of the project is a very interactive guy, and with not only us, but with the general community. And they seem to handle criticism of their product very, very well. And this is something that you really need in a dev team. After spending the amount of time that I have in the game, I do have two main critiques about the core of its gameplay. And when I say core, I mean the game, yes, is in its alpha stage, but all in all, this is designed to be a quote-unquote looter shooter with extraction mechanics. And even though the world is persistent and you have the ability to ride a helicopter from point A to point B, and there is no load screen ever, in and of itself, it is still a looter shooter with the idea of having something be punishing if you die. That's kind of the core of what an extraction shooter is. Along with that, there are like a quest system, something that the devs have talked about. There's like 150 quests, for instance, for all of us to be able to do. The nitpicky things like animation canceling when you're trying to reload so that you can sprint to cover, things like that. That stuff doesn't exist in the game. Maybe it will in the future, but I'm trying to stay away from that little nitpicky stuff and be more along the lines of like critiquing the core of the game, the main idea of what you're doing and the main game loop. But to be fair, the devs do seem like they care an awful lot about the nitpicky stuff too. For instance, right now, it is very, very easy to camp landing zones for the helicopters as they're coming in. People can't jump off early, they can't defend themselves, they can't fire from the helicopter. There isn't any like smoke being spread out from the little bird as it lands. You're kind of just left out in the open to get shot at. When I say the dev team is relatively passionate about their stuff, there are guys in the office right now testing out options for fixing this issue that they want to have fixed. They see it as a problem, and it will be. When the general public gets their hands on this game, that camping is going to be a major issue across all servers. But instead of focusing on that, I want to speak on the core aspects and what they're building right now. Right now, the AI opponents, for example, are pretty dumb. AI is a huge part of this game. It's touted as being primarily a PvE game, but it's also touted as being something that is supposed to be milsim-like. And as if we needed another DayZ comparison, right now it feels like the enemy AI is very similar to that of DayZ's zombies and all of the jank that they entail. In this case, though, the zombies have guns and voice lines that they love to spam. And at this point, I want to remind everyone that is still watching the video that the devs have stated they want this to be closer to a milsim than a game like Escape from Tarkov. There are active decisions that they're trying to make to push this toward a milsim. However, given how the AI reacts right now and how, I guess, really dumb they are, especially at distance. They don't run for cover. They don't try to move in tactical fashion. They don't have formations. There aren't anything about the AI right now that makes it feel challenging, not even in the heaviest, most defended areas. It's really just the same game loop and the same janky AI with better stuff to get off of the loot pinata. And this is something that desperately needs to change. People in the last video told me, well, I should just go to like a tier 2 or a tier 3 area, and the AI is much, much more difficult. And I do not agree with that at all. In going there, I barely ever get hit because I approach these fights the same way that you would approach fights like Tarkov, checking corners, moving slowly around them, shooting them in the face before they shoot you. Those things are things that still end up holding true, and the AI just dies. Now, granted, once in a while they would end up taking me out, but because of the way the game loop is, you hop in a helicopter, you fly back to the LZ, you go back and you get your body and you kill more stuff. Like, it was just really, really easy to do. In this case, it didn't feel like there was that much of a punishment, and I failed to see the AI acting in a way that was tactically challenging. And I think that's what this game really, really needs. However, that is secondary to the larger issue, which has to do with this core game loop that is being promoted to us right now, which is the questing system. There are three main aspects of the game that would make people want to play it. The PvP, which is something that you kind of have to go out and find. The gathering of loot aspect, tricking out your gun, tricking out your armor, making things look better, bigger, flashier, less recoil, better handling, right? And then obviously we have the questing system that helps us unlock all of this stuff via trader unlocks, which again is a very, very similar mechanic that we see in a wide variety of historic games like this one. As you improve your character's reputation with the vendors unlock stuff. Dark and Darker has that. Hell, World of Warcraft has that with their reputation systems that they have built in with their PvP battlegrounds. It's everywhere. Aside from just the general curiosity of it all, the main reason why people end up going to different towns on the map is for missions sending them there. And then, of course, in going there, you're trying to trick out your firearms, right? And so the builds that people end up making end up being the lowest recoil, best handling guns they could possibly build in these cases, which then becomes a very, very Tarkov-like gun game where players try to make some of the ugliest looking firearms because they have the best possible stats. And once they build their meted out M4, they then go on whatever killing spree they possibly can, die from it, and eventually go back to base just to build a new ugly stick and go back again. Now, in the sense of Tarkov, this is an acceptable practice. But if the game is trying to be a milsim, based on what the devs state themselves, it would be an unrealistic expectation to assume that the same meta modality that applies to a game like Tarkov would make sense here. There's nothing wrong with building an ugly gun for the good stats, but there needs to be some form of a trade-off. If you're going to build a gun that's designed around having a minimalistic amount of recoil, it should be done where there's an exchange of ability to have like good handling of the gun. Make it slower to raise, make it have extra arm stamina drain so that you can only really aim down sights for a short amount of time before it becomes uncontrollable, etc. Extra barrel sway, something. Remember, this is from the perspective of what the devs stated they want this game to be. And if they take away the ability to build variety and have variety be effective, it won't be that military sim that they're trying to make. This, of course, is aside from the economy being kind of upside down right now, where traders kind of offer you the best possible weapons that you could possibly use, and the AI's dropping of items really isn't all that valuable aside from stuffing optics and suppressors in your backpack to go and sell off to a vendor for money so that you then can buy more of the best stuff. Secondarily to this is the mission system itself, and by extension, the PvP in the game. Remember, the whole idea behind the game is that you're supposed to team up with 4 players. Most people, I think, like to play with their friends. However, if you were to go and play with a friend that even had a one-day head start, they end up on a completely different set of missions than the ones that you're doing. And all of the missions being designed around solo goals becomes a problem. Now, the missions are the same idea of Tarkov missions, fetching an item or placing a marker on the same type of quests we've already seen in EFT. And because of the nature of these quests is to do something as a solo or personal goal, there's no incentive for any of your teammates to want to bother helping you aside from just being kind. Nor are you incentivized to want to do anything for anyone else because that doesn't further your own progress or help you become richer. Aside from the potential of a new piece of armor or a gun or attachment, which you have almost no space for given the limited storage capacity of your PMC, in which you likely already have better attachments available to you from the vendor, even with the best gear available to you on the map by killing the worst or hardest mobs. There are plenty of examples of games implementing group mechanics via these types of sandbox games or goals. And they don't even have to be sandbox games. Take, for instance, Alterac Valley from World of Warcraft's Battlegrounds system. The game rewards players for taking and holding group-based objectives. You get more points for that, more amounts of currency, and that currency turns into stuff. Or Battlefield 1942's point capture system. Or a game like Ark, where sieging large bases give rewards to every player involved in the loot that they all get to share in: guns, armor, blueprints, tames, etc., because they all work toward a common goal. Even a game like New World, where territory control meant controlling tax rates and fees assessed to the general public, and controlling forts meant certain global buffs for the factions controlling them. But this game doesn't currently possess any incentive to team up, nor does it include incentives for any of the faction-based gameplay. Factions don't have a purpose right now. In my opinion, if they want to distance themselves from the games that have predated them in this genre, they're going to need to have much more of the core gameplay loop be centralized around team-based goals. At the moment, there aren't any goals that have anything to do with the factions as a whole. The only thing that a faction is currently good for is being able to see a blue dot on a map so you know who the friendly guys are that you're not supposed to kill. They don't even wear colored armbands. At the moment, PvP is also centralized around these missions. There's no PvP team-based goal anywhere on the map. The only way that PvP currently occurs in the game, aside from players just going off and trying to force it, is if two factions who are doing the same missions end up in the same place at the same time, and then end up having a firefight as a result. While this core game loop can be Adrenaline Rush City for a day or two, eventually it starts to wane because there's no real incentive or benefit to PvP in the game at all, aside from just getting a kill and possibly getting a piece of gear that you could use. But that is rare, again, because the vendors have the best stuff. In my mind, this is the thing that will make or break this game. As it's constantly compared to, whether we want it to be or not, it will be compared to DayZ, Arma, and EFT over and over and over again. There needs to be a mission-based objective or objectives that are centralized around team play and team goals. Otherwise, the faction system is meaningless. I want to say, well, first I want to apologize. My voice is a little bit hoarse. I'm still fighting this laryngitis, but I want to say that the devs in this case, and I want to reiterate this, I think the devs are doing a good job. As a pre-alpha test, the game is great. It really is. I have not seen a pre-alpha go this cleanly. So they're definitely on to something. But there needs to be more than just pretty packaging. Flying around a really, really great environment, like we've seen in games like New World, for instance. New World has amazing environments and amazing audio, even. Probably the best audio I've ever heard in an MMO ever. But that isn't enough, hasn't been enough for the core gameplay to be able to really take the forefront. And that's what matters. If it's not going to have good gameplay, if there aren't points to doing what we're doing, if there isn't something to strive for that makes people want to come back and keep playing the game is not going to be successful. It will sell a lot of units maybe on the onset due to the hype train, but it won't last and withstand the test of time in the way that we would all like to see it happen. In a game like Tarkov that obviously has withstood the test of time, or games like Hunt Showdown that have obviously withstood the test of time, managed to be able to pull off what they're pulling off because of their uniquities. This game needs that. And if it's going to push itself as a milsim, it needs to design itself as a milsim in a way where the AI can really take the forefront and you're like, dang, okay, this is cool. And also give those team-based goals so that the factions feel like they're supposed to be gathering around each other and like working towards some amount of commonality. Territory control would be a huge piece to this that could end up being very, very, very cool for the foreseeable future, if it's done right. Anyway, guys, that's what I have for this one. Thanks so much for coming and checking it out. If you'd be so kind as to, I don't know, maybe sub the channel, that would be dope. Maybe hit the bell, that would also be really, really awesome. Otherwise, you can come and check out a stream at twitch.tv/Onepeg, where I am live around 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, just about every single day. All right? Thank you guys so much for lending me your eyeballs, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.